We all know Netflix is famous for making not good, just okay shows. They have plenty of screw-ups, but if you dig down deep enough, or scroll down deep enough, you will find a diamond in the rough. What's that? They're taking it off Netflix? But it's a Netflix show, where am I supposed to watch it? So yeah, they're taking Voltron off Netflix, which is weird, because it's a Netflix show. So now I have to buy the DVD set and watch it on DVD, like a cave person. Netflix is weird. Do I like it? I don't know. Is it worth the amount of money you have to pay for it? Probably not, but at least you don't have ads, right? Okay, I'll stop crapping on it now because I actually have very fond memories of Netflix. Like, I grew up with it, and I remember when it looked like this. Me and my sister would like to look away to see if it would load faster. It didn't, and it still doesn't. This year and last year, I watched a lot of TV with my parents, and out of it, I actually watched a lot of TV that I really liked and otherwise wouldn't have watched. So here is my 2024 Netflix Wrapped. Spoilers ahead for every show mentioned. Bulk of the House of Usher came out in 2023, I think, and honestly, I don't remember when I watched it, but I do remember it was winter, so I think it was last January. But I want to talk about it, so I'm going to count it even if it was like December of last year. So this show is so awesome, and I started obsessing over it pretty much as soon as it began. I love the idea of telling the story as a retrospect, and also this idea of a family cursed because of the actions of their patriarch, falling deeper and deeper into their own vices, ultimately becoming their own downfall. Slow descents to madness are such an interesting trope to me because you don't realize what you're doing wrong, and by the time you realize, it's too late, and I don't think there's anything scarier than that. Also, the depiction of death, or at least fate, or some kind of entity that's haunting this family is so cold and calculated at sometimes, and yet also so caring to others. In the scene where she comforts Lenore, which is the main character's granddaughter, as she brings her to her death, she can't help but apologize and try to tell her that even though she's going to die, she will still do good things in her life because of her legacy. The difference between that and someone like Lenore's father, I think his name is Michael, but I don't actually remember. He's honestly a scumbag. And it's so interesting to see the different ways that this character treats these people. She genuinely tries to instill fear in Michael's heart, and like his death is honestly one of the worst in my opinion. He's basically unable to move because he's been drugged, and he just has to lay there as this pendulum blade comes closer and closer to opening up his stomach, and he knows he's going to die, but there's not anything he can do about it. And he knows it's going to be painful, but he can't move. That's terrifying. I like this show because it also has a heavy focus on like color symbolism, which is something that I think is really cool and underused in a lot of media. Each child of the main character has a different color associated with them, and that color becomes more and more prominent as they get closer to their death, which is really cool because it offers a lot of really interesting and frightening lighting in a lot of scenes that is so just not something that's often done within cinematography. So it was really beautiful to see these symbolic lights and these symbolic colors as people were getting, like, you knew when you saw more of that color, you knew what was going to happen, and that's so like, it instills so much suspense because you know what's going to happen, but you don't know when. Overall, I think I would give this show like a 10 out of 10, which I don't usually do because I'm like a hard grader, but I honestly don't really remember anything that I didn't like about the show. It was really good, and I can't think of anything glaringly off the top of my head that I was like, oh, I wish they didn't go that route. I wish they didn't do that. You know, I just remember being genuinely terrified and like really, really liking it. It's pretty gory and graphic at times, which is not something I'm usually a fan of, but it takes inspiration from Edgar Allan Poe stories, and anyone remotely familiar with his works will know that those are pretty dark, so I gave it a pass for this time. The Brother's Son came out in January, and I watched it with my parents in the summer, around August, I believe. My dad recommended it one day when we had nothing to do, and the first thing that drew me in was the characters. Charles and Bruce are so different, and yet so alike, and their interactions are truly so fun. This show dives into family dynamics and how that ties into our lives and the choices we make or are forced to make in some cases. Another thing that impressed me was the set design and the fight choreography. There's this one scene where there's this huge fight at this spot, and the way the camera moves around and follows the protagonists, and the lighting, it was just so, and it made my heart so happy. The characters again draw you in because there's this random guy in one episode, and I was like, oh my god, I love this guy. And then he died, and I was so upset. I cannot stress enough how little he was in the show, but he was such a well-written character, and his interactions made him feel so real outside of just the other characters that I was so upset when he died. Michelle Yeoh also delivers an amazing performance because, again, her character, like all of the others, feels so real. She wants to protect her sons and yet is also driven by her own ambition. She has multiple motivations like any real person would, and we love that for her. Multifaceted queen. 2 honorable mentions of the best parts of the show are Bruce just having no idea what is going on at any given moment because he just wants to do improv, and Charles being a good baker, being able to create something that people can love, something sweet that people can love, contrasted with his skill as an assassin. How he has to constantly destroy something, break eggs to make a cake, something, I don't know. The storyline is really interesting. That was another thing that really drew me in, was like I genuinely was like really enthralled by the story because you have this like brother that comes out of nowhere and he's like, okay, I'm here to protect you now. And the other brother's like, I didn't even know I needed protection. I didn't even know you existed. And I would give it an 8 out of 10 only because at the end, Charles was going to start a bakery, but then he didn't. And he ended up going back to, I think it's Singapore. He ended up going back to Singapore and being a bodyguard for his mom, which I felt like was just against the character arc that he had. I know they did it so they could make another season, which like valid, but I really wish that they had him continue in like on his own journey instead of like what everyone else wanted for him, because it was like very obvious throughout the entire show that he'd been pushed into this life of being an assassin for like his entire life, like since he was like a little kid. And Bruce didn't have that, and Bruce was able to be who he wanted to be. I don't think it was fair that Charles didn't get to be who he wanted to be, but Bruce did. Chaos is probably one of the best Greek myth adaptations I've seen in a while. I have a lot more to say for this show because I originally was going to make a video on just this show, but I actually never finished it because school started and I got busy. But I wasn't even planning on watching it originally, but my aunt recommended it, and I could tell that the casting was pretty good from the get-go. Most adaptations portray Zeus as this almighty, all-knowing, righteous dude who will protect humanity. Anyone who knows anything about actual Greek mythology will tell you that the guy straight up sucks. Even the other gods think so. In Chaos, Jeff Goldblum encapsulates everything that Zeus is in myth, a weaselly little man scared of losing his power. Zeus is not the cool dude that everyone thinks he is. Sure, he's powerful and defeated Kronos, but that was only really because he made him throw up, and then the other gods helped him afterwards. Jeff Goldblum is very good at playing a certain type of character, and Zeus is that character. He's this guy you love to hate. He's charismatic, oblivious, and most importantly, incredibly paranoid. I also really enjoyed that Prometheus is the narrator of this tale. He also carries a lot of humor and a lot of pep in his step, actually. He's a really, like, lighthearted, fun character. And one of my favorite things about it is that Zeus truly believes that the two are friends. And Prometheus is not having this at all. I also really like how Hera is portrayed in this show because I think a lot of times Hera kind of just ends up being like the wife. And it's like, that's all she is, and she's not important otherwise. And I felt like the show really gives her like a character and actually like dips into her cruelty that's very, very real in mythology. She's portrayed as this like old money mom that like hates everything, and I love that because that is so Hera. Similarly, there's a lot of other stuff that I feel the show takes some liberties with that I'm really okay with. They take these myths and they sort of like make their own interpretations of it. I think a lot of times when you have a Greek myth adaptation, it's trying to be like, well, this is the correct story. I'm also obsessed with the casting of this show is not trying to do that. Dionysus, and honestly just like the fact that he's even in it because he's never in anything. The last little tangent I have about this is the idea of combining several lesser known myths is so cool. I'm a huge Greek mythology fan, and I actually only knew 2 of the 3 main stories off the top of my head. In fairness though, they did make some changes to Canis' story, so it wasn't super obvious unless you knew his name right away, which I did not, but I also didn't ever actually know of his myth, so it was really cool to learn about. I love that there's this modern society existing within the boundaries and the laws of ancient Greece. It's such an interesting concept, and anyone who likes mythology should watch it. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 just because I haven't finished it yet, but I don't have any complaints so far. So I'm gonna finish it and I'll get back to you. Don't be mad, but here's another show that I haven't finished, but that I'm currently obsessing over. Black Doves came out a little over a week ago at the time of recording this, and I love it so much. I love spy stories that deviate from the norm, and this show is that in literally every possible way. I have around 2 episodes left currently, and I am so invested in the story and the characters, and I cannot wait to finish it. So essentially, you have a soap opera of these different love stories unfolding around these spies who are only human and susceptible to their human impulses, and honestly just want to be done with everything. They don't want to be spies anymore, they want to live normal lives. The two leads are so fun together because you have two opposite gender characters that are genuinely just best friends and not romantically interested in each other, which is very rare for some reason. It's been happening more, but still not enough that this is something that really stood out to me. Also, it's cool to see people you don't typically see in action movies as action stars. It makes their roles as spies all the more believable because they look like regular people who live regular lives, even though the opposite couldn't be more true. There's also this deep mystery that connects all the characters and this lingering feeling that someone is lying or that something is wrong. Because we know something is wrong, but we just don't know what. Truthfully, I'm obsessed with the characters and the storyline, which just has me in awe and genuinely yelling at my TV every time something is about to go down. I haven't had a TV experience like that in a while, where I'm so invested, I'm like trying to reach the characters I know can't hear me, and it's so awesome to have this experience again. Overall, I think I would give this show also a 9 out of 10 because I haven't finished it yet, but I don't have any complaints so far. So, in conclusion, I watched a lot of TV and obsessed over a lot of stuff this year. There's also a lot of shows I watched that weren't on Netflix this year, but that I do want to just mention as like honorable mentions. One of those was Mr. and Mrs. Smith on Prime. Really good show, like genuinely so good. I also watched a lot of older shows and movies this year, so that was really cool too. Those don't count because they're not Netflix originals. So that's why those were not mentioned in this. Anyway, Happy New Year and happy finals week.